Good day, everyone. I'm Ruth Dimalaluan, and I'm here to present to you the part 2 for the discussion of the topic leadership and influence processes. Now, the first three objectives of the entire topic actually had been discussed by my partner on the first video, Apple Magpantay. On the discussion that she has facilitated, we've learned about the nature of leadership and its relation to management. We have discussed over there and evaluated the two generic approaches to leadership. And lastly, we have identified the major situational approaches to leadership. Now, adding more knowledge to what we actually have learned on the first part of the discussion, our learning objectives for this session would be to identify and describe the three related approaches to leadership, discuss the different emerging approaches to leadership, and have a deeper understanding, of course, about political behavior in organizations and how it can be managed. Also, just to add, at least at the end of our discussion, I will share to you some insights and learnings that I have for the article journal review that I've got in relation to my topic, which is about leadership. Talking about the first thing that we would be discussing for today, that's actually about the related approaches to leadership. So, because of its importance to organizational effectiveness, of course, leadership continues to be the focus of a great deal of research and theory building. The concepts of the following approaches have attracted much attention. So, to name the three related approaches to leadership, we have substitutes for leadership, charismatic leadership, and also the transformational leadership. The first one in line is the substitute for leadership. What exactly do we mean by substitute for leadership? And do leaders really have substitutes or something? Or what exactly does it mean? So, the substitute for leadership is a concept that was developed because existing leadership models and theories do not account for situations in which leadership is not needed. So, we are actually used to an organization, or let's say in a company, that there really are leaders, there are managers, there are higher persons above the rank and file employees. So, what does it really mean that leadership is not needed? It's simply trying to specify what kind of leader behavior is appropriate. So, it does not necessarily need to have a person identified in particular that she's the leader, but only what leader behavior is appropriate on given situation. Now, for you to understand it better, on the second description of substitute for leadership, it identifies situations in which leader behaviors are neutralized or replaced by characteristics of the subordinate, the task, and the organization. What exactly does it mean? So, for example, the best example that I'll be able to share with you actually about substitute for leadership is when a patient is delivered to a hospital emergency room. The professionals on duty do not wait to be told of what to do by a leader. So the nurses, the doctors, and attendants, they just all go into action without waiting for directive or supportive leader behavior from the emergency room supervisor. So that's one best example of situation where leader behaviors are neutralized, or leader behavior is specified on the given situation. Moreover, characteristics of the subordinate that may serve to neutralize leader behavior include the ability, the experience, need for independence, professional orientation, and indifference toward organization reward. Also, employees with a high level of ability and experience may not need to be told of what to do. So it's like the employee themselves are already empowered. They know the tasks that they really have to do. They have the sense of urgency. of doing exactly what is needed without having to be told at all. Now, leadership may not be necessary when policies and practices are formal and inflexible. So that's exactly the whole content or concept of a substitute for leadership. Now, if we're good about it, we just have to move on, of course, on the second approach, which is charismatic leadership. So, from the word itself, it's going to talk about charisma. So, if you personally have, if you have that high level of charisma, then of course you can also be a potential leader. So the charismatic leadership approach, it actually assumes that charisma is an individual characteristic of a leader. Just so we would better understand, charisma is a form of interpersonal attraction that inspires support and acceptance. All else being equal, then someone with charisma more likely to be able to influence others than someone without charisma. So influence is a fundamental element of this perspective. So it's like if you are with a high level of charisma, you also have a high level of influence. Now, Robert House's theory of charismatic leadership suggests that charismatic leaders are likely to have a lot of self-confidence, a firm conviction in their beliefs and ideals, and a strong need to influence people. In addition to this, of course, charismatic leaders also tend to communicate high expectations about follower performance and express confidence in followers. So, with my understanding, of course, so charisma includes influence, high expectations, and also a lot of self-confidence. Now, on the next slide, I just want to also provide you a comparison as an example of like let's say the previous and let's say the present leaders of United States of America. So we've got Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and we have George W. Bush. So Donald Trump is an excellent example of a charismatic leader. Why? It's because even though he has made his share of mistakes and generally is perceived as only an average manager, many people view him as larger than life. So I really agree with this one because a lot of criticisms are being thrown against Donald Trump, but his charisma just is still able to stand all of those criticisms and oppositions. Not really updated about politics, but of course that's really how I take it, how I perceive things as well. Let's talking about Bill Clinton on the other hand, he's also a charismatic leader. So he's actually been, I believe, one of also the respected and loved presidents of USA before. But some of the critics argued that this very charisma caused his supporters to overlook his flaws and to minimize some of his indiscretions. So sometimes it is as if because of high charisma, your supporters are being blinded about your flaws and your mistakes. And lastly, we have George W. Bush. He actually did not possess a high level of charisma, and because of that, he may have enabled some critics to magnify his shortcomings. So yeah, their personalities, their auras, their charismas really actually had a high like a big has actually been rather a big factor on the success or how the fellow or let's say their followers or the citizens of USA will actually look up to them as leaders. Now, going on or moving on, our third related approach for leadership we've got transformational leadership. So for this one, it's a leadership that goes beyond ordinary expectations by transmitting a sense of mission, stimulating learning experiences, and inspiring new ways of thinking. So that's really a good definition for transformational leadership. So it's actually transforming you into something better. Now, for this one, we've got the case of 3M, company 3M. So their CEO, George Buckley, is working to make the film more efficient and profitable while simultaneously keeping its leadership role in new product innovation. He has also changed the reward system, overhauled the procedures, and restructured the entire firm. So this is actually a good approach because it gives you like it actually gives you a mission. It probably challenges the employees or the followers of leaders who actually had the transformational approach, because you're being challenged or are actually being upskilled. If there are things that can be improved, then these are good opportunity for leaders to actually use this approach to their followers, of course. So that's actually so far the related approaches to leadership. Just to have a quick recap, we actually have the substitutes for leadership, charismatic leadership, and the transformational leadership. Just making sure that we are actually on the same page. And moving on to our discussion, of course, we have this time the emerging approaches to leadership. So these are still emerging as of the moment. So the first one in line is strategic leadership. This one is the capability to understand the complexities of both the organization to achieve and maintain a superior alignment between the organization and its environment. Also, for this one, a manager needs to have a thorough and complete understanding of the organization, its history, culture, strengths, and weaknesses. Also, the leader needs a firm grasp of the organization's environment, and that understanding must encompass current conditions and circumstances, as well as significant trends and issues on the horizon. So, of course, I would say, and I totally agree here, that managers need to have a thorough and complete understanding of the organization, because it would actually help you come up with the the perfect strategies. I wouldn't use the word perfect, because it may not really be the perfect one, but the most suitable strategies based on the assessments, and of course based on what has been perceived and observed by managers that are needed to be improved, or what strategies have to be have what course of actions or strategies can they actually come up with. And also, the next one for the strategic leadership, we've got cross-cultural leadership, where culture has a big factor on this one. So we're talking about culture here as a broad concept to encompass both international differences and diversity-based differences within one culture. So cross-cultural factors play a growing role on organizations as their workforces become more and more diverse. So for this one, of course, for example, in our nature of job, which is a business process outsourcing company, we are a very diversified organization. It's because we don't there's no particular, to start with, there's no particular requirement for what degree in college, or if you've been an undergraduate, what college degree have you taken, so long that you are at least an undergraduate of 2 years in college, you are actually qualified to be employed. So aside from that, you could actually come up with different profession or different job previously before being employed in a BPO. So on that instance, I would say we are being completely diversified. Having culture as a common denominator, of course, that the leader would actually use. It could actually bond, or it can actually at least unite the completely diversified employees or followers in the organization. Also, you may have different beliefs, but the common denominators, of course, would be the culture itself of every organization. Now, going further, the third emerging approach is the ethical leadership. High standards for ethical conduct are being held up as a prerequisite for effective leadership. So it's more about ethics, having high standards. Top managers for ethical leadership are being called on to maintain high ethical standards for their own conduct, to exhibit ethical behavior unfailingly, and to hold others in their organization to the same standards. This is why, of course, leaders really need to have um, that they really have to be ethical. They have to set as good examples to their followers, high standards, because that actually provides the impression as well to the followers or to the employees that if the leaders are under the high standards, then they really are effective, and of course the company itself is a high standard one. So again, just to make sure and have a quick recap that we really are on the same page, of course, the emerging approaches to leadership that we have discussed would actually be strategic leadership, talking about strategies, cross-cultural leadership for culture rather, ethical leadership, which mainly focuses about ethics. So we're good about the approaches right at this stage. If you have something to share about the approaches that you actually believe are being implemented or being shown by your leaders, you can share that, of course, through the comment box of in our group for further discussion. So far at this stage, I also would like to share with you about political behavior in organizations. So what exactly are the political behavior? So this actually describes activities carried out for a specific purpose of acquiring, developing, and using power and other resources to obtain one's preferred outcomes. So talking about politics in this one, it may be undertaken by managers dealing with their subordinates, subordinates dealing with their managers, and managers and subordinates dealing with others at the same level. In other words, it may be directed upward, downward, or laterally. Now, for you to better understand the political behavior, it actually has listed here the 4 common political behaviors, such as inducement, persuasion, creation of an obligation, making you guilty, coercion. So, talking about inducement, this actually occurs when a manager offers to give something to someone else in return for an individual's support. For me to provide or cite to you a good example about how, let's say, a leader or a manager actually execute these political behaviors, we will actually talk about the former WorldCom CEO Bernard Erbers. So he actually made frequent use of the common political behavior on different circumstances. So in the inducement one, he actually allowed board members to use the corporate jet whenever they wanted and invested heavily in their pet projects. So it's actually allowing you, like, it's providing a favor, so that a favor in return would be given, let's say, in due time when it's needed. Next in line is persuasion. So this relies on both emotion and logic. So how did Ebers use persuasion? So for instance, when one board member attempted to remove him from his position, he worked behind the scenes to persuade the majority of board members to allow him to stay on. So it's actually persuading, convincing. It could actually be a worst case scenario that may also lead to harassing depending on the ground. So that's about persuasion. Third, we've got creation of an obligation. So it's actually being like as if in debt when something has to be done and needs additional support. Just like what we've always said, debt of gratitude is hard. We cannot just pay it, no matter how we wanted, unless there would be this difficult circumstance or situation. It's creating an obligation. It's making you feel guilty even though you shouldn't be guilty about something. So Ebers actually loaned WorldCom board members money. That's actually how he used the creation of an obligation, but then forgave the loans in exchange for their continued support. So it's because you owe, because these board members owe some money, or could be a huge amount of money to Ebers, that's actually been used by Ebers in return to actually gain the continuous support from the board members. Lastly, we have coercion. It's the use of force to get one's way. And for example, this is a manager that may threaten to withhold support, rewards, or other resources as a way to influence someone else. So it could also be just like persuasion, or depending on the on grounds. This is just in my own opinion. Don't get me wrong. It can also be a form of somehow a harassment, because it's about threatening. It's about giving discouragement, and yeah, from that point, the followers may have second thoughts of doing the right thing or not doing the right thing at all because of the behavior of their manager. So for Ebers, it's actually a common tactic used by him as well. So he actually reportedly belittled any board member who dared question him. So belittle, humiliate. So this is really not good political behaviors, but as reality hits us at certain point as well, we cannot deny that it may really be happening, you know, behind the doors of our managers or leaders. But hopefully, as we become aware of it, these are at least things that we can, we cannot control ourselves, but at least I hope that these are political behaviors that we can overcome somehow, so we can still continue with our job or do our job properly, even though we've got these leaders. Or probably we may have some leaders, or you may have encountered some leaders. Lucky you, or good for you guys if you actually don't have this kind of leaders or managers. But yeah, it may not be on your case, but at least we are aware. So if you actually have this political behavior, of course we need the managers or the leaders also would need to have a way of managing the impression that they provide to the people around them, especially to their subordinates or to their employees. So, impression management, talking about it, is a direct and intentional effort by someone to enhance his or her image in the eyes of others. The reason why people engage in impression management is to make themselves look good and for people to think that they are more likely to receive the rewards and to be given attractive job assignments and to receive promotions. So if you actually have a good impression, let's say as a rank and file employee, then you are the one who is more subject to rewards and promotion. Also, this is to boost the self-esteem of a person, and it is an effort to acquire more power and hence more control. So this actually applies to the higher or the upper management, let's say the leaders, supervisors, manager. If they actually have a good impression, if they can actually manage having a good impression all the time, then they can actually acquire more power and control over the others. Now, people attempt to manage how others perceive them through a variety of mechanisms. And appearance, how we personally appear, is one of the first things that people think first. Hence, and of course, a person motivated by impression management will pay close to choice of attire, selection of language, and use of manners and body posture. This could also be the reason why, of course, the leaders, the managers, the directors or the executive, they really dress well. They really have a good appearance. With what they actually with what they wear, even with their hairstyle, with their makeup, with their accessories, because it actually gives that perception of having a good appearance. Of course, is providing a good perception from the people around you. So on the other hand, sometimes people too strongly motivated by impression management become obsessed with it and may resort to dishonest or unethical means. So it's like you just really look good on the outside but not on the inside. And if that's actually the case, it may actually be it may be unethical, of course, depending on what intentions or motives you have, for example. So talking about what are the common political behaviors, how impression can actually be managed, this time we would also be talking about managing political behavior. So again, the political behavior, the common ones, the four most common that we have discussed earlier is inducement, persuasion, creation of an obligation, and coercion. And managing political behavior is important because by its very nature, political behavior is tricky to approach in a rational and systematic way. The following that I'll be discussing to you are guidelines on how managers can handle political behavior so that it does not do excessive damage. So the first one, managers should be aware that even if their actions are not politically motivated, others may assume that they are. And also, by providing subordinates with autonomy, responsibility, challenge, and feedback, managers reduce the likelihood of political behavior by subordinates. The third one, managers should also avoid using power if they want to avoid charges of political motivation. Managers should get disagreements out in the open so that subordinates will have less opportunity for political behavior through using conflict for their own purpose, being just and fair. And lastly, managers should avoid covert activities. Behind the scene activities give the impression of political intent even if none will exist. So these are like under the table transactions, behind the scenes. So these are like decisions or actions, course of actions taken, which are not um, you know not being told, not being open at all to be told or shared to the other employees, especially those on the rank and file or the followers of the employees, the followers of the managers rather. So yep, I would encourage that if there is like a manager or a supervisor in our class to also share with you your insights or your experiences on how you're actually managing political behavior. Also, if you can share if you had been in that situation where you have you have um, possessed this kind of political behavior, and or you had been challenged not to really use those political behavior at all, and how you've overcome it. And yep, the reference for this report so far, just to share, is Fundamentals of Management. That actually ends my report from this point for the topic about leadership and influence processes. But this time, very quickly, let me just also share with you my journal article review about how effective leadership can facilitate change in organizations through improvement and innovation by Mu Junhao and Dr. Rashad Yazdanifard. I'll just at least provide you the takeaways or what's really been my learnings for the review that I made. So for this journal, my takeaways would be that effective leadership is one of the most essential parts of the overall method for an organization to sustain their business in the face of problems caused by the rapid growth of the economic environment. Also, a person with strong leadership ability will be a good example or role model to their employees, because the leader who is able to effectively achieve some good result or achievement gains the trust and admiration of their employees, and advertently changes their values, beliefs, behavior, and attitudes, for mimicry is the sincerest form of flattery. Also, one important takeaway that I have is leadership and management are two different aspects. For me to just at least further elaborate, management is more like the traditional way of managing business, which the owner of the business has complete control of the organization and will single-handedly establish a direction and direct their employees to do their work in accordance to the owner's instruction and plan. On the other hand, leadership is when the leader guides their employees towards the organizational goals, all the while trying to communicate and motivate their employees in order to make sure that their employees are in the right position to use their talents and commit to their jobs. Also, leadership strategies also will change according to the current trends when necessary, unlike management that merely follows its old traditional rules. So, leaders and managers are different from one another. Cases or instances that they may actually be a combination of both, but at least on that discussion that we have, we're able to have an understanding that leadership and management are different aspects. Next takeaway that I have is there are 3 stages in change management. Why? It's because change. The only thing that's constant is change. So there's management of change as well. In relation to effective leadership, it's adapting to change, controlling the change, and affecting the change. So again, change has always been an issue for organization, just as it has always been a common characteristic of human life. Change is definitely hard for humans to accept, as it is something that pull people out of their comfort zones. which forces them to change their habits and makes them highly uncomfortable. Thus, change management is important. So again, change management, it's actually important, and in an organization, this can be defined as an approach to deal with change in two different areas. That would be the organization and the individual, and with individuals and the overall organization adapting to change at their own pace and style. So the change management allows the organization to catch an opportunity to gain a competitive advantage, and if the organization effectively and efficiently implements and adapts to the change of the market. And just like how I have informed or introduced earlier, there are three stages. The first stage is adapting to change. It's actually determining the individual readiness to adapt to the changes and their willingness to commit to the change. Next one is controlling the change and implementing it in daily life. The third one, the last one, of course, is affecting the change, and this means that it is trying to sustain the change and to get used to it in life. So it's actually completely embracing the changes and adapting, controlling, affecting, getting used to it. So it's really part of our living, or it's part of our life. That's actually what it means to us. The next one for the takeaway is the factors affecting leadership, such as trust, organizational culture, learning, and lastly, it's actually the teamwork, communication, and leading. For you to actually understand it better, trust is an essential issue in leadership for leaders, as gaining trust of group members or employees could help to improve the overall performance and commitment of the group members or employees. So example is, if the employees or the group members trust in their leaders, of course, it actually reflects that they are good and effective leaders. Only when the employees trust in their leader will change be brought about, and because people will only follow a person that they trust. I agree. People will only follow a person that they trust to lead them to the correct path, not a leader that only talks but without action to back up their words. So trust is really important. The next one, leadership can shape a good culture. This is also, of course, for organizational culture. A culture is shaped within the trust between the employees and the leaders of an organization, or it can be defined as cultures need trust to be able to form. Employees and leaders in the organization need to trust each other in order to shape a good organizational culture. Leaders with strong leadership skills are able to shape a positive culture in the organization, and due to them being able to inspire trust from their employees. So trust is already included, of course, in shaping a good organizational culture. Now, the next one that we have for this one, of course, we've also got learning. So what about learning? So for learning, in affecting the organization, affecting the leadership. So learning, we actually just need to have leaders that actually are encouraged, or that have that has that interest to actually continuously learn, or continuously want to be trained. So learning is a continuous process, not just for the rank and file employees, but also for our leaders. That's actually what it means by learning. An effective leader can encourage employees in the organization to learn through certain types of motivators, such as rewards or position, and it's continuously learning, continuously being trained, upskilled is one of the ways to improve the overall performance of the organization. It is not only the employees that need to improve, but even all segments of the leadership level of an organization. And if it's only set as a good example to the bottom line to motivate them to learn. Also, leaders should join leadership training programs in order to strengthen their skills and knowledge, making them more effective in their strategies and execution. I agree. So, learning is really a continuous process. Now, lastly, of course, we're going to talk about um, teamwork and communication and leading, of course, being part of it. So, teamwork, you actually cannot live if you don't have a team. That's actually my take on that part. If you don't actually have team members, you're not gonna be a team leader. So, besides strengthening their leadership skills, leaders also would need to encourage the employees of the organization to be innovative and cooperative. Teamwork and communication are the best way to create innovative ideas in order to produce the best outcome for the organization. Because again, a leader won't exist if there are no follower, and you can only be called as a team if you have a leader, if you have member, and if you really are working all together. So yep, that sums up the whole report that I have for um, leadership and influence process, and also my sharing of insights or takeaways for the article journal review in relation to leadership or leading itself. I would encourage everyone, if you actually would like to share also your experiences, your insight, whether you're an employee or had been a leader or a manager, you could actually ask me questions by commenting through my post in our Facebook group. Also, if you need clarifications, I would encourage you to also include that. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and have a great day. God bless.